Welcome to another episode of Soap Thing Thoughts. Joining me today is Sully Cortez. Welcome to the Soap Thing Project. How are you, man?
Doing good. Thanks for having me.
I saw your recent collaboration soap. Congratulations on that. That's quite an achievement.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, it was a good effort amongst all parties. So it was really cool to put something out.
I'll have to get my hands on that here pretty soon if there's any left, because it does look like it's a pretty good high quality product. So I'll definitely have to check it out. So I'm dying to know. I ask every guest this: how did you stumble into this hobby? How did that get started, and why?
Sure. So I'm actually coming up on 1 year in July 23rd, and basically it started because I had never really been into shaving. Period. I mean, kind of here and there, using regular cartridges and whatnot, but or like electric razors too. But I had always kind of had a fascination with straight razors in particular. And so I kind of just one day out of the blue decided, oh, I want to learn about that. And last year I ended up just kind of digging into it a little bit and finding out more about it. And then I kind of uncovered this whole world essentially of wet shaving. And that led me down one path, which led me down another. And then here we are a year later. I've amassed a pretty giant collection of hardware and software, and kind of fell into the rabbit hole.
Yeah, sounds like you fell down the rabbit hole pretty fast and pretty hard, kind of like I did.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of
Definitely.
a rapid creation of the snowball going downhill. But
Yes.
sometimes that's how it goes. Okay, so the topic that you picked for the episode was limited edition and vendor exclusive products. So I have a couple laid out here just for the sake of example. So I guess an example of a limited edition or a one-off scent would be something like this. This is WSP Chai, which
Mm-hmm.
was I guess you could call it a seasonal, but I don't recall them releasing this last year. So I think this is just something they did, just to do it once. Another example of that would be something like Murphy and McNeil Infinitus Collection. This is basically what they do is they take a bunch of scents that they're experimenting with and they make a single soap in that scent. So they'll release like 40 scents, but they only made one soap in that scent, and this is the only one. So Murphy McNeil does that quite often. Let's just start with like limited edition and one-off soaps. Personally, my opinion on the matter is like seasonals I'm okay with because it's coming back around every year. But if it's something where you're like, I'm just doing a batch of 200, and when they're gone, they're gone, no matter how successful it is. I'm not sure how I feel about that one. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. It's funny you bring up Murphy and McNeil because I also have an Infinitus release. This is the Sandalwood Vanille from last year's drop. And as much as in fact I like this so much. And here's kind of the deal of why I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I liked it so much that I actually reached out to them and asked them to make me a frag, so an actual EDP of it. And luckily, they had just enough of the oils left to do so. And so I actually had a full trifecta. I had the splash and the soap. Normally, for some of these Infinitus lines, they only do the soap. You might get lucky; they may do a splash as well. But I had them actually do a frag too, so I had the trifecta. And as much as I love that, no one else can enjoy that. No one else can get it. And while that's cool to an extent because of the rarity and exclusivity, I would also like other people to enjoy that scent because I think it's amazing. I think it's like one of the best that they've done. I've tried a lot of the Murphy and McNeil line, and the Infinitus line. It seems like it's kind of more like their top end premium releases, if you will. But yeah, I kind of agree with you. I would personally like one offs to be more available, if you will. I
Right.
know that's why they're called one offs, but
Right. Well, one can speculate. I'm just going to grab another one. Here's an example of this was part of Sterling's Black Friday releases. This is SB 129, which is a dupe of Azaro Chrome.
oh,
It
okay, nice.
smells pretty close, if I'm being honest. But I think the issue that these artisans might run into, it could be just an economic play. Like we're going to create this pent up energy, but I think some of it is certain scents are really hard to pull off. It's really difficult to get it to stay anchored to the soap, or maybe it's really hard to source those particular oils, or maybe it's really expensive to source those particular oils. Something might make it difficult to produce it on a larger scale. I suppose we'd have to ask the artisan, but one can speculate that at least some of the time, the reason that a soap is made in just a one off or in very limited numbers is because it's not repeatable over the long term.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's almost like you can't scale it. You can't bring it to scale because you just there's no availability of the ingredients necessary to do so.
Yeah, that could be some of it, or maybe they're just worried that it's not going to sell very well. Because I remember when Sterling Deep Blue Sea was initially released, it was in a 3 ounce tub just like this. It was a Black Friday release, and it sold so well that they re-released it as a general release, and it's in their top five bestseller, and it's been that way ever since. So
It could
another
also
part
be
of
like risk taking too. Like, they don't want to, like, for some of them, especially maybe something like that, they haven't done a scent quite like that. And they might be a little bit fearful that if they were to do a large batch, they may not be able to sell it all.
risk averse, basically,
Yeah.
uh, that could be some of it. We're just trying to spitball over exactly why we have this situation, because on some level, I would rather have a limited run of like only a few hundred soaps in a certain very specific scent, go out onto the market, and then at least some people get to experience it. So that's the positive, but there's another side of my brain that's just like, yeah, well, some people get to experience it, but it doesn't get to be experienced on a mass level, and not everybody who would probably enjoy it gets that opportunity. So it's kind of
Right.
a double-edged sword, I guess. Actually, here's another one. This I'm not sure how this would really count, but let's talk about it. This is Mike's Natural Soaps, and this is what is it? Rose, patchouli, and cedarwood. Here's the thing about this: the way Mike's does business, he kind of makes soaps in whatever scent he wants, just whenever he wants. So once this particular scent sells out, it might be 6 months or a year before it comes out again, or you may never see it again. So it's this I think would fall into the limited edition category. Not maybe that's just because that's not what he chooses to make right now, and he may never get around to it again, or it may take a while.
Right. So I've never tried Mike's, but I have heard of them, and I've heard of other artisans doing that too, where they drop a release and it's either like you especially something like that, they stay on that one release until it sells out, and then either you may not ever see it again, or it takes a very long time before it comes back. um Kind of the same deal with, I know they're not in business anymore, but Talbot. So like Cole's Pond, this is kind of the same deal. Come out with a release and sit on it for a little while, let it sell. Maybe it sells, maybe it doesn't, maybe it sells out, maybe they pull it. I've seen that happen too with other artisans. It doesn't actually sell out, but it just disappears, and you can no longer get it. And then you see it appear, like 6 months to a year later on buy sell trade forums and pages and stuff like that. But yeah, it's interesting that they would choose to do that. I'm not too sure 100% what the thought process behind that is, but I find it interesting when they do choose to do something like that.
Yeah, definitely something we might have to ask artisans, just for gee whiz, like, hey, this scent you only released like a couple hundred of them. Why is that? Maybe they'll tell you. Maybe it's just a matter of asking them. One thing I know we're going to probably create some controversy about is vendor exclusive scents. Like, full disclosure, I participate in that sort of thing. Like, here's one right here. This is Lothar Grooming Red, which is a
Mm-hmm.
TRC exclusive. Love this one. I understand why retailers do this. It's a very clever economic decision because it keeps people coming back. It's almost like the console wars. You know what I'm talking about between PlayStation and
Yep.
Xbox.
Oh yeah.
So every vendor's got to have their exclusives, but personally, on principle, I would prefer if they didn't, just because I've had some great scents come around to the razor company, for example, that look pretty interesting, but then it turns into it's like, well, maybe I'm not shopping at the razor company today. Actually, the a lot of the stuff I've acquired recently came from past stores, but I'll go ahead and
Mm-hmm.
digress. What do you think?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm glad you brought this up because I've got a couple here that we could talk about as well. So like there's many vendors out there, people shop all over the place. But it seems like nowadays it's kind of not necessarily whittled down, but it's more narrowed down as far as who artisans are choosing to do specific exclusive releases with. Let me give you an example. You brought up Pasteurs, so here's one from Shannon's, and this is PP53 Shannon's and Pasteurs.
Uh-huh.
So just to kind of give you a little rundown here. Here's Sanctified from Hags. This is a TRC exclusive, right? So Demetrios, who runs Hags, decided to do just this specific scent with TRC. And then to go down the line, Subtle Art Soap Co. This was a collaboration with Bricktown Grooming and the Shave Supply. So while I love all of these, and I think it's cool that they do collaborations like that, I also think in a way, it almost divides the community essentially sometimes, because in speaking with people, some people have their preference as to where they like to shop. And we don't have to get into specifics of why, but it would be nice to see those releases available at all locations, because then people who don't normally, who may not even be, talking in the community, who just shop at their favorite vendor, they don't even know that exists. And usually what happens is on the artisan's website, you don't even see that release exists unless you know about that retailer or vendor and you happen to stumble upon it. Otherwise, it's kind of, if you shop there, will you know that it exists? Or if you follow their social media, then you'll find out that it exists. But it would be nice to see a lot of these available everywhere. So I understand both sides of it. I understand why it's not done at every vendor retailer. I also understand why it is done at at different exclusive vendors and retailers, especially in the case of the Shave Supply. Gareth is a good dude, runs a good shop, and not that anybody else isn't, but I thought it was really cool that they did like a three-tier collaboration: Bricktown, Subtle Art, and the Shave Supply, kind of a mass of three artisans coming together, if you will. I mean, Shave Supply is more of a retailer, but they do have their own artisanal products available as well. So,
Right. Yeah, and it seems like you see a lot of exclusives at certain retailers, like the overwhelming majority of Holy Cow exclusives are with Pasteur. So,
right.
and then I think the overwhelming majority of Lothar Grooming exclusives are with the Razor Company. And so I think artisans are kind of picking their poison at this point. They're forging relationships, which there's no shame in it. Uh, but I think you made a good point that even I didn't think of, which is people who are maybe more casual hobbyists. They're not taking this whole thing that seriously. They might they may shop at just Maggard razors and not know that this soap over here at past stores that they would have loved, and they might not know it even exists. I honestly didn't think of that, and it's a really good point. So I think if we're gonna if we're gonna permit this to be a common practice in the hobby, I I think we as content creators, product reviewers, need to maybe do a better job of popping this stuff up on social media, because I think a lot of people might not be tuned in, but eventually at some point or another, it's going to come across their social media feed and they're going to like, that sounds pretty good.
Right. And then to that point is that usually what happens is, especially in the case of myself, you don't even find out about these releases until they're sold out. And then you're like, oh man, I would have loved to get that. But now it's sold out because it was a limited run. I can't get it anymore. And the only way I can get it is if it happens to pop up on a buy, sell, trade forum or website or something like that.
Question for you. If you had to pick one, what is your favorite vendor exclusive or the best one you've ever had?
That's a tough question.
That's what makes it interesting.
I would be remiss if I didn't say my own, Lothor Amigos. But as far as not my own, honestly, I'm really gonna say this is my favorite exclusive, simply because I am a huge fan of Creed Green Irish Tweed. It's one of my favorite fragrances, and I know that this is primarily more of a Irish moose homage inspired by, but it also is in the same vein of Creed Green Irish Tweed and Irish Brigade. Phil at Bricktown Grooming really hit the nail on the head as far as scent. Does a really great job with some of his scents, and that collaboration between Joe at Subtle Art, Gareth at Shave Supply, and Phil, I thought was fantastic. I thought it was a really good release, and I'd have to probably put that one at the top of my list.
Is that one still around?
I don't think so. I know Irish. I'm pretty sure Irish Brigade is still sold, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm not even 100% sure if the splash itself is still available. So whether the soap is out or the splash is out, I'm not too sure.
I'll have to look into that one. As far as me, I don't know. I think it's a toss up between Timmerman from Pasteurs, Timmerman 1, the black label. I can't decide if I like that one, or another one that comes to mind is the Ethos Grooming Rendezvous, I think is what it's called, which is the Creed Spice and Wood inspired scent, which kind of fits my MO when it comes to scent dupes. If you must do an inspired scent, try to do a scent that's inspired by something that everybody else is not doing. And as far as I know, Rendezvous is the only one that's doing Creed Spice and Wood. So I think I'd have to hang my hat up on that one. As long as we've covered the main topic, though, how do you feel about scent dupes or inspired scents just more broadly?
I'm glad you brought that up too. So, like, going back to this collaboration, so this Sanctified by Hags is an inspired by of Tom Ford Oud Wood, and I don't know of any other artisan that's doing Oud Wood off the top of my head. Maybe there is, but I like when, if an artisan, like you said, must do a dupe or inspired by. I'm okay with dupes and inspired by as long as they are well done. In other words, like I don't mind if they are going for spot on in the case, sometimes in the case of PAA, like Doppelganger series, it's almost like spot on to the original frag. But I also don't mind when they take creative liberty with the fragrance and kind of make it their own. It still has the homage and the root of the original fragrance, but they've kind of put their spice on it. They've put their own little pizzazz on it to make it slightly different. I'm okay with that. But if you are going to do an inspired by or dupe in a limited or vendor exclusive, I would say do one that nobody else is doing, because then you've got something really fresh, unique. Not only is it available at that one retailer, but it's a fragrance that nobody else is doing. And it kind of gives it a little bit more of an exclusivity factor.
Interesting. You put a bunch of thoughts in my head. So the first thing I'm going to address is Tom Ford Oud Wood. So Murphy and McNeil makes a Tom Ford Oud Wood dupe, which is freaking amazing. So if you have a chance to get a sample, definitely pick that one up. Pinnacle Grooming also makes a Tom Ford Oud Wood inspired scent, and that one was disappointing. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. That one, while it was an okay scent, it was not remarkably close to what it was trying to emulate, which kind of rolls me into the next topic I want to talk about, which is you mentioned artisans taking creative liberty. So I guess in my personal opinion, if an artisan sets out to do a dupe or an inspired scent, and it either by accident or on purpose doesn't smell remarkably close to what it's trying to be, then I would say that effectively makes it not an inspired scent. Like, what's a good example? 345 Soap Company Etched, which is an amazing, it's one of my all-time favorite scents. But basically what they did was they took a powdery oak mossy kind of barbershop scent and added coffee and leather to it, which in my opinion changed the scent character so much that I think it can no longer be considered a barbershop scent because you made too many changes to it. The scent is still absolutely amazing, but let's not kid ourselves. That's not a barbershop scent anymore. So,
right.
And it's always puzzling when an artisan lets a soap out onto the market that was seriously trying to dupe something else, but it did a very poor job of it. Because I've had a lot of those come across my den too, where it was just like you pick it up and you smell it and you're like this was an honest attempt at duping a scent, and it did not go well. So I don't know. Have you ever experienced something like that where it's like, okay, I know exactly what this is going to smell like, and then you pick it up and you open it and you're like, nope, that they don't got it. They don't have it.
Oh yes, quite a few. I'm not going to bring up any names, but there's been quite a few that I've gotten where it's way off the mark. And I mean, that could be a couple of things. I mean, people smell things differently to each their own, but you know, we all, especially in the fragrance world, if fragrance comes out, you know what it smells like, right? Like if you buy the fragrance, you know what it smells like. You ask somebody else, they also have the fragrance. They know what it smells like. Not what it smells like to them, but like the actual, for example, I know everyone brings it up because it's like the most popular, Creed Aventus. Everybody knows what Creed Aventus smells like. So if you're going way overboard in terms of trying to be creative and you're not even close to the original, I think that's a factor of two things. Either A, you were trying to be so creative with it that you just missed the mark. But I also think something that's not really talked about is honesty. And I feel like that's a big component too, that seems to be missing in a lot of areas. Honesty in terms of providing good, honest feedback. A lot of artisans have a very tight-knit group of testers and some reviewers and things like that. And I feel like a lot of them don't want to hurt feelings, and that's good. I'm glad. We're not intending to hurt anybody's feelings, but I feel like in that same vein, a lot of them don't provide the necessary feedback to the artisan to really tell them, hey, this is like nowhere's close. It's not even close. It smells awful. You're really missing the mark here. Here's what I think you should do. Here's what I think you could do to bring it kind of back to home base. I think we need a little bit more of that. You yourself, I love the videos that you do because you provide serious, honest feedback. And there's a couple of other people out there that are doing videos as well that provide serious, honest feedback. And while sometimes not everybody may want to hear that feedback, it will, in the end, allow the artisan to create a much better product that would be pleasing to a lot more people, in my opinion.
No, I agree with that. And to your point, I'm not sure when this video is going to go up, but either in front of it or behind this video, there's a video where I did a test of there. I got sent by an artisan a bunch of test soaps. I'm not going to reveal who that artisan is right now. You'll either already know or you'll know here shortly because the video reveals it. But they sent me 3 tubs of shaving soap, and 2 out of the 3 of them were just like, "What were you doing?" Like, what is this? And then the third one was pretty much on point. It was exactly where it needed to be. So, and I told the artisan, it's just like, look, the first 2 are not doing it for me. These have problems. And sometimes I think that's why they do it. They're looking for honest feedback, and I would hope that people are not playing nice, especially when behind the scenes stuff like that is going on. Like if you get sent a test product, that is when I would hope everybody is being very brutally honest. Like
Yes.
this and this and this needs improvement, and it needs it quite badly. Otherwise, you are going to assist stuff being released that is not as good as it could have been. And I've had artisans who let me review their test products publicly, and I've had other artisans who prefer that I do it behind the scenes and that I do not do that. And but either way, I try to provide them feedback where it's just like, I experienced exactly this sensation when I was doing this part of the shave, and this is what it is supposed to feel like, and it didn't. So
and in the case of these like one-offs and exclusives and things like that, because they're so rare, I feel like then it's even more of a necessity for honest feedback to come in so that they do hit the nail on the head,
Yeah, you're right. Another question I just thought of. Have you ever gotten a soap in the mail that was dead on arrival? Like it was supposed to have a scent and it showed up and it just didn't?
Yep. I just got one actually. I won't say who it is, but they're actually releasing their first soap coming out soon. And when I got it, at first I read the scent notes and everything, and I got a little flyer that came with it that said, here's a detailed breakdown of the scent notes. But man, it was not not only was it not what I was expecting, but somebody else also who I talked with got it, who's in the community as well. They got it as well. And I asked them their honest opinion and feedback, and they were in the same boat. They also were like, wow, this is not only is it not what we expected, but like you need to go back to the drawing board on this one, because it is. I personally wouldn't be content releasing something like this to the public, and I wouldn't want to see you do that as well for fear of people ragging on you and just really being brutal about it, versus giving some humble feedback and then you change it and make it a lot better. Unfortunately, this was like straight up dead on arrival to the point where I shaved with it. I used the product as is, but I don't think I could go through it again because it was almost that bad.
Really? I don't think I've had a scent where it was just like this smells freaking gross. But but I have had plenty of soaps show up that were supposed to have a scent, and the scent didn't stay anchored to the soap. It just what I call flashed off, where
Hmm.
the scent just dissipates because the scent oils that they're using didn't agree with their soap base. Uh, I'm not going to mention any names either, but there was one artisan who is very well known and very prominent where I bought four soaps in a row from them, and every single one of them was supposed to have not only have a scent but have a strong scent, and there was no scent at all. So I was just like, "What is going on?" I give you four chances, and you can't make the dots connect each other. Like, what is going on? So, but one of the things, and I've spoken about this on other videos, I think some of these artisans are cranking out so many products that their attention span runs out of gas. So something gets missed because they're pushing so many products out the door. I'm not saying that excuses it, but I think there's a reason, and I've just discovered this recently. I think there is a compelling reason why there sometimes is shoddy quality control standards, especially if you're a popular artisan, because there isn't enough bodies, there isn't enough set of eyes to look at every product in great enough detail.
Yeah, I agree with that. What happened to the days of three? Again, I've only been in the hobby for a year, but I feel like this applies to almost any industry across the map. The days of um, three releases a year, four releases a year versus 20 releases a year, 25, 35, 40 releases a year. Um, I feel like that, if you can do it and you do it well, great. Okay, then do it. But I was just speaking with an artisan the other day about this exact topic. How come you only release, four releases a year? Well, their response was because I like to put everything I can into those releases so that when they come out, no one is going, "Wow, this is terrible. This really missed the mark. Why did I even bother putting this out?" There's a bunch of artisans that come out with three or four new releases a month. Which again, if you can do it and people are buying it, okay, fine. But I feel like you're absolutely right. There is a miss on quality control because of the fact that they want to pump out so many releases versus taking the time to focus specifically on just a handful and making those not only the best that they can be, but the best in the market. Like there's some artisans where we can clearly say that they are at the top of the game. They are at the top of the heap. They are on an elite level. And I think that's because they take the necessary time to make their products as good as not only they could be, but better than everybody else's, or at least try to make them at such a high standard, such a high level that people take notice.
Right. You know something? I'm about to say something that maybe it's controversial, maybe it's not. The people who are cranking out 20 or 30 new releases a year, those are people who are making cash grabs. Like there is no way they're putting sufficient time and thought and energy into it. They're just trying to ring your dopamine bell and open up your wallet. Uh, the other side of that coin is people like Moon Soaps who almost never have a new release. Like you're like recently they've come out with one, maybe two a year. There was a while where I think there was like, God, at least a year and a half, maybe 2 years in a row where they didn't release anything. So because
Right. I just saw they released Bixby was their latest release.
something else about Moon Soaps, because they think very carefully about what they release, they only have, I think, one discontinued scent. The rest, the rest of their scents have been around the entire time. So,
That's cool. I like that. Like there's one artisan that it's not only just one, but I mean, there's one in particular that I feel like every month there's several new releases, and then what happens is some of the releases that have been around for a very long time, even though they may be like really good sellers, they get rid of, whether it's temporary or not, they get rid of to make room for the new stuff. I feel like just in the case of moon soaps, you shouldn't even have to do that. You should still have that library should still be there forever, so that new people coming into the hobby that don't even know anything about you can still go back and grab that. And that kind of revolves around the whole limited one-off vendor exclusive topic, because having a consistent library that people can fall back and rely on. Like, what happens if you use up that soap and you wanted to get it again? Well, now you can't, because they made room for 5, 15, 25 new releases that they just came out with.
right. And let's be clear, this is not unique to the shaving industry. I mean, if you think about it, look at the evolution of cars and how, people want you to buy a new car every couple of years, 2 or 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, when the car you have will probably last you 10 or 15 years if you take care of it. The same is true in a lot of other industries that we see in our daily lives. But one of the things I think is interesting about shaving is that it's more easily accessible. Like it's 15 or $20 for a puck of soap, versus like buying a new car. And so I think people get sucked into that revolving door of sense, because on a on an absolute price level, this is one puck of soap. This is $20. Well, people don't realize $20 adds up after you've done it
Sure.
10, 15, 20, 25 times. And so I wouldn't go so far as to say it's exploitative to have so many releases, but they're definitely doing it to get your attention. I want the audience to think about this for a moment. What do all of the artisans that are cranking out dozens and dozens of scents a year? Let me ask you this question, Sully. What do they all have in common?
As far as
I'll just go ahead and spoil it for you. They all have very elaborate labels. Have you ever noticed that?
oh yeah, okay, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, yeah,
They have very elaborate labels. And so they are trying to wow you with a presentation. It's actually the same thing happens in the fragrance hobby. Like, I don't know if you watch people like Chaos Fragrances or Gent Scents or something like that. And they
yep,
talk about how scents that are, or fragrances that are selling really well, will get discontinued to make room for this year's latest flanker. Like, I've
yep,
been collecting a lot of fragrances lately that are older, like Chanel Antaeus and YSL Koros and Dior Jewels and some of the other ones, Jacques Bogart, things like that. And one of the things you notice when you start collecting older fragrances is there weren't flankers back then. Like, flankers didn't start until 99 or the year 2000, before the
that's
flankers
right.
started getting really common. Before that, a fragrance got released, and it might get released as a fragrance, an aftershave, and a shower gel, but there weren't flankers. Um you didn't have like Aqua de Jo, and then Aqua de Jo Profumo, and then Profondo, and then they finally do an EDP. Like, it wasn't like that. Like, when people released a fragrance, especially a hit fragrance, it was one and done for the longest time, until recently, when you've just got this explosion of flankers. It's like Dolce and Gabbana Light Blue, I swear to God, has a flanker every freaking summer. And
Mm-hmm.
And in order to have those flankers, they have to push an older one off the shelf. So it's a very clever marketing strategy to get people to buy the newest and the greatest. But I also think it's easy to see through that. If you really stop and think about it, you can kind of see what they're doing. Like, is it clever marketing and clever business? Yes. Is it nefarious? No. Is it in good faith? Probably not. But that's what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, you're either going to buy these products or you're not. And if you buy them, you're either going to enjoy them or you won't. So I think, I guess at the end of the day, I would rather have it that way than not have it, because with all these scents coming out on the market, there's a lot of bad stuff you can say about that. But I also think that one of those might end up being truly iconic. You just don't know.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
I don't have a good example around me really closely, but Aventus, the Creed Aventus dupes, ended up being basically this phenomenon because Creed Aventus was a phenomenon.
Right.
So
And to hit that point too, like 1 million. So like 1 million's got a bunch of flankers as well. And in my opinion, it seems that the vast majority of people who have tried all the flankers, like Privé was probably the best flanker that's come out of the 1 million line. Elixir is really good, but Privé's been discontinued, so now you can't get that anymore. If you can get it, but that goes along with that point. If you didn't have the flankers, then you might not have that release, which to the vast majority of people, it seems that that's the best release that's come out in that line.
right. Yeah, I've had a couple of fragrances get discontinued that it really kind of sucks. Prada Luna Rosa Black is one that I thought was really good,
Mm-hmm.
but sadly it got discontinued. We could talk about discontinued fragrances all day, but I think we've adequately met the point of all these 20 releases a year, these limited edition, these one-off, these vendor exclusives. There's pluses and minuses, but I think ultimately it's up to you to decide how you feel about that. Me, there are things I like about it and things I don't like about it. Like if it's a good enough scent, I'm going to pick it up, even if on principle I don't appreciate that they're doing that. If it's a good enough scent, I'm going to buy it because I am still uh, the whole reason you get into this hobby is for the aromatherapy. Like if you didn't care about scent, you wouldn't be here.
You
You
would
know,
just
you'd
get
have
unscented everything.
yeah, you'd have two or three shaving soaps and a couple of brushes and a couple of razors, and that'd be it. Like this is basically a poor man's frag head kind of group, if we're gonna be honest. Like we've all seen those fragrance YouTube channels where it's just like this guy must be a doctor or a lawyer if he can afford all those fragrances. But you can make a lot less money and still have a very robust uh aroma oriented hobby in this shaving hobby that we have, and I think that it's amazing that we can do that.
Yeah, and I think one thing too to touch upon is that, like from the artisan's perspective, I also understand this too, in that being a creative, it's hard to not want to do something new. It's hard to, while you may have your mainstays, of course, any creative is going to want to create new material. They're going to want to experiment. They're going to want to, possibly create new releases. But in the same token, to go back to this kind of discussion, is that you really need to be, like, at least in my opinion, selective on what you are creating when you're creating it, because then it just seems like you're pumping out all these releases for a motive that may not be as as good as one might think. Let's just say that.
Yeah, we got to close this video up, but I think you made an excellent point. Let me be very clear. It's entirely possible that some people who are cranking out all of these crazy amounts of scents every year really do think they are advancing the hobby. And if they seriously believe that, then that's good. But I also think there are some people who are just like, I have figured out how to make money and I'm going to exercise my skill or my knowledge on how to do that. It's up to you on how you
Mm-hmm.
feel about that. But let's not pretend that some of them aren't really trying to advance the hobby, because I think we would be doing the community a disservice if we seriously believed that. Some of them I think are trying to be honest with us. So let's make sure that we make that point as clear as possible.
Definitely.
Now, I always ask every guest if you could give advice to new shavers or seasoned shavers, what have you learned since you got started that you can pass on to other people?
Okay, so I would say the biggest thing that I've learned by far, I mean, this is like if I could go back a year and tell myself this in advance, I would absolutely do it, is to right off the bat experiment with fragrances, because unless you're getting unscented everything and you don't really care about fragrance, um, then you don't care about fragrance. But if you care about scents and fragrances, initially try to find out what you really like, because then you're not going out and buying, you know, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 soaps just because you're trying to find fragrances that you like, versus knowing ahead of time, okay, I like oak moss, I like vetiver, I like sandalwood, I don't like barbershop, I don't like patchouli, I don't like rose. Um, it saves you a lot of time, money, headaches, and I think it targets you as well. I'm going to like these releases. I'm probably going to stick with these releases instead of spending a ton of money and time buying things that you may not like. And then I see a lot of people, they'll buy a bunch of releases. They may use it once and then it goes right up on a buy, sell, trade site because they didn't like the fragrance, because they didn't know ahead of time that it was potentially a fragrance they weren't going to like. They just may have liked the artwork, or they may have liked the artisan, as opposed to actually liking the fragrance that they thought that they were going to like and use. Because let's face it, a lot of people buy a lot of these things and they don't actually use them. They don't tub kill. And I see that a lot. I see a lot of people just buying something and then it immediately goes up for sale, which is fine if you want to do that. But if I could go back a year and tell myself, hey, pick out the fragrances that you like so that you don't have to buy a bunch of stuff and then resell it. I think that would be the most important thing that I would tell myself or anybody new to the hobby.
Very good. Very good. I like that advice. I will add to that. There are lots of ways that you can get to know fragrances. You can get samples of shaving soaps. We now have Maggard and TRC and a couple other places where you can get shaving soap samples. You can also go online and get decants or samples of actual fragrances. You can get samples of Dior fragrances and Chanel and Dolce & Gabbana and Prada and Creed and all these other brands. You often can get decants of those to get to know a certain scent. So it's just like, yeah, exactly. So you might be like,
Mm-hmm.
I want to know what vetiver smells like. Well, go get you a decant of Tom Ford Gray Vetiver or Encre Noir or something like that, and it'll familiarize you with that particular scent, and then you can kind of see if you're going to enjoy it.
Right.
Another thing you can do if you're really trying to be frugal about it is just go into a Sephora and start popping tops and just smelling stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to walk out smelling like a goofball when you're done, but it'll get you familiar with lots of different scents, because Sephora often has a good variety of fragrances. They got the blue fragrances, the woody fragrances, the sweeter fragrances. They might not have really challenging fragrances. It depends on geographically where you are. A funny story about that before we get out of here. I've noticed that Europeans love their old school fragrances a lot more than Americans do, because you can still get Chanel Antaeus and YSL Coros and a lot of those other fragrances from the 80s off the shelf at practically every fragrance retailer, versus in the US, I don't think I've ever seen Chanel Antaeus sitting out on the shelf. I don't think I've ever seen it. So just something I noticed when I was off base here in Turkey and out in London was that, damn, they love their old school scents because that stuff is still on the shelf and they're still selling it. Some of it, like I know Koros is discontinued in the United States, but it's not discontinued in Europe. They're still making it.
Interesting.
So just something to think about with that. All right. Well, Sully, it's been a great pleasure having you on. This was a great conversation, and we need to have you back on again sometime soon. I will go ahead and put Sully's card at the very beginning of the video, so you can click on that to find his channel. I'll also put all his social media in the description of my video. I want to thank everybody for watching. Until next time, this is Soap Thing telling you, shave like you mean it. Thanks for watching.